Many blame South Africa's problems on issues with their educational system.
They have some very good universities. They have some really good schools, too. But these are sort of elite institutions.
The ANC government inherited a hugely problematic education system. Those education systems that were not for white children were poorly funded. Teachers were poorly trained. And so the ANC has had an enormous task dealing with the long history of sort of underfunding of rural schools where a lot of African children still attend school.
You have 11 million young people between 11 and 25 years old, and a full third of them are not mainstreamed into the economy and are not receiving the level of education commensurate with what the expectations ought to be for that generation.
South Africa's economy has grown dramatically, but there are calls to diversify away from a reliance on international mining contracts and tourism if a greater cross-section of people are to benefit from economic growth.
We are now at around 490 billion GDP from 102 in 1994. So it has grown about 4 times the GDP. It's almost like 26% on the African GDP. It's like an economy. So by your standard, it's a state economy, but our standard is a very big economy.
South Africa is both a first world economy and a third world economy. Literally, in parts of South Africa, you could be in Southern California, except just over the hill, you can see the smoke from the cooking fires from an economy that essentially has a good deal in common with Cameroon.
To face the significant economic headwinds that South Africa has in front of it, they could stand to diversify further, and it is part of what the United States seeks to do in partnership with South Africa.
There are calls for the ANC to reform or be replaced, but with change often comes instability.
First of all, it's not going to happen. It's just not, they're not quite there yet. My prediction was, when I left South Africa in 2009, was that I believe you will see the day that you will see a new party leading the country, but they're not quite there yet.
As the ANC has declined, you are now getting much more radical voices, which spook some South Africans and also spooks some American potential investors.
I think as long as it was peaceful and whoever took power was able to, call the president and talk to him or her and continue, with these economic relations, I think the United States would be okay with it.
I would actually like to see South Africans, and especially the youth of South Africa, to come up with South African solutions for South African problems.
If the ANC does lose at the polls, most predict a peaceful transfer of power.
They had a democratic transfer of power when the National Party, the Afrikaners, came in the 1940s, and then they had a democratic transfer of power when the ANC beat the Nats in '94.
If you look at the way the ANC has lost its majority in the Cape and in Gauteng, in the municipalities of Johannesburg and in Ekurhuleni, it's clear that there have been transitions of governance at the local level that have occurred peacefully, seamlessly, and that still enables average citizens to give expressions to their expectations, their desires from their government.
Any pressure from the U.S. is likely to meet with resistance. The Secretary General of the ANC charged that the U.S. was pushing for regime change in South Africa.
It's a sad reminder, an echo of our having been at times on the wrong side of the liberation struggle, that anyone would even suggest that we're engaged that way.
There was some public spat back and forth between the ANC and an ambassador there, on Twitter, no less.
I was impressed to see that within days of making that accusation and with our pushback, the Deputy Minister of Defense walked back his claim, apologized for it, and both the Foreign Minister of South Africa and the Secretary General of the ANC immediately came out and spoke to the virtues of the partnership that exists between the U.S. and South Africa.
We both today have inspiring foundational documents, our Declaration of Independence, their Freedom Charter, and the structures of constitutional democracy in robust, wide-open, multi-party democracies.
It's easy to look at the current politics and to be dissuaded of one's hope and to be cynical about it, but I'm not at all. I think that so much real progress has been made. I witnessed the resilience of democratic institutions in that country, from the courts to the Office of the Public Protector to the space that exists for coherent and forceful opposition voices in Parliament and even within the ruling party. The resilience of those democratic institutions and that infrastructure gives one hope and optimism for the decades ahead.
More than 2 decades have passed since Nelson Mandela's historic election transformed South Africa. Pressure is building for further change. Only time will tell when it will come and what shape it will take.